Guljeet, welcome to ExcelQ Live.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you again. How are you?
Good to see you. Yeah, I'm always excited for these events. I'm always learning something new myself, which I really appreciate as a host. So thank you for that. Great event so far. So thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, we couldn't be happier with Heather and this session. They complemented each other's, knowledge, what they shared, and that was a perfect start to the event.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Guljeet, the floor is all yours. People have been asking for a live demo. I don't know if you're actually going to do one, but I would tell them you would be. Teasing them, so hopefully you are. But yeah, it's all you.
Yeah, I'm glad I decided to do this live, and I just switched to my order because I didn't want to start with slides no more. So
Nice.
I'm gonna actually just pretty much start out before we go to Oracle Live and a lot more conceptual stuff straight to what Uday was talking about, so that everyone can basically relate to everything. Heather set us a really nice platform in terms of the strategy and how should you approach, and really coming in from the source itself. And then Uday really complemented it well with how customers are doing it, how CAP is helping customers, what is the pre and the post picture. So with that, I'm going to just bring kind of a little bit of a direct relationship to what kind of Uday was talking about, right? So if Joe, if you can, if you all can see my screen,
yep.
Right?
Looks good.
Wonderful. So basically, this is kind of an example of a universe that Uday was referring to, right? And you can see, it looks pretty, pretty complex because it has a ton of stuff in there, right? Like if I just go to my navigation, you'll see it has hundreds of scenarios over hundreds of pages with 200 plus steps in there, and you can see the universe looking as complex as it is, right? And for those of you who don't know ACCELQ that well, right? They kind of touched upon the different aspects of how the post ACCELQ world looks like. But just to give you an idea, this is something which is pretty unique to us. We call it the universe. Think of it as an application flow diagram. Think of it as a blueprint of the application that you're testing. In this case, obviously, we're talking about Oracle, right? and CAP and ACCELQ kind of collaborated to create, something which brings the best of subject matter expertise, which is from hundreds of implementations CAP has gained. CAP being a platinum partner of Oracle. Has known a lot of flavors of different implementations, different industry verticals implement. And then obviously ACCELQ bringing in the modularity, right? The design first approach, which basically makes a new way of creating these test assets, which are reusable. An old school accelerator based test approach, which are packages, accelerators, have been around for at least 20 years now, right? But the challenge with accelerators is they're static, right? I mean, there are days when, for a couple of years, customers didn't used to have any upgrades, and then they'll do a big bang upgrade. But with Oracle Fusion and more modern software development practices, these are pretty much changed in every release, which happens 3 to 4 times a year, right? So that's what makes these test assets special. One is they have release alignment, which is real time. Nobody has to do an upgrade as such, right? And second is these are all configurable to any complex implementation. In fact, if I go in a particular scenario, right, for instance, creating requisition on behalf of a field service engineer, each of these steps are nothing but these lines in the universe, which means the more scenarios you create, the more behaviors you create, the smarter your universe is getting. Which means think of it as this way, right? The universe is basically gaining more and more routes and directions, and it's like a map which is getting smarter and smarter. So the more behaviors that are getting defined, the more steps are getting added to the universe, and it's automatically breeding that reusability and modularity. And that's the key, right? If there is one thing you want to remember from what I just talked about is I'm not thinking object oriented terms, right? I'm not thinking what do I need to reuse. Once I'm on a page, it tells me, the universe tells me that, hey, you know what, on this page, for instance, I'm on the receivables page, what are the actions my users can perform? And that's what drives my uh, my test scenarios, right? Because if you think about it in abstract terms, what is a test, right? It's a series of actions users perform, which takes them from one page to another page. And in this process, you validate against an expected outcome, right? So that those are the processes that are getting embedded as part of the universe, and kind of bringing that intuitive reusability and modularity. And then if your one of your page changes, let's go, right? Let's look at one of the pages. Let's suppose this page changes, manage transaction page. See how many objects are getting interacted on this page. There are 13 different objects. It has a DOM capture across each of these pages. Let's suppose for a particular implementation, this changes. All I really need to do is basically tell my page that, hey, can you capture a new view? Can you record a new view for this page? And downstream, all the different actions that are performed on this page, they could be part of 100 different test scenarios. It won't really matter at that point, right? Because that referential integrity in universe will go out and propagate and basically take care of all the change management, right? Which you all will agree, right? Which is where the rubber hits the road in automation, right? When you scale up, how fast can you automate? When you have changes, right? How fast can that change be managed, as opposed to reinventing the wheel in terms of going through updates and changes, right? So let's look at one of the results. I think that would kind of bring a little bit more. So you'll see this create requisition with a field engineer, right? And by the way, this can be run across multiple data permutations and combinations, and that is also part of the universe that CAP has built, right? Which means that all the values which are pick list values, search values, data list of values, will use an algorithmic approach to auto-generate the permutations and combinations of data. So there are several pick lists you'll see here, right? Which means that if I go to a particular scenario, I can use this little lightning button and it will come back and tell me what are the ideal permutations and combinations. It uses kind of a flavor of pairwise algorithm, but that's basically what it does. Because if you think about it in a particular test scenario, there are many different data-driven inputs, right? For instance, a create requisition lines is more data input heavy, right? If I go in this scenario, you'll see a whole lot of logic in there, which has certain conditional statements and so on, right? And you'll see everything right in blue here is basically your data-driven inputs, right? Which means you have to provide that data. ACCELQ supports both data-driven inputs, obviously, as well as other type of smart inputs, which means, like I was saying, you can have pick lists of values which can then help you create new test cases without always putting an overhead on data, as well as you can have you can have global properties right here, which means you can align your inputs with your environment variables. You can also have synthetic data generation, right? If I go within an action, and if you remember how how ACCELQ action works, you just start typing random or synthetic, and and it'll basically let you. If I just start typing random, for instance, right? So, if you know ACCELQ, the logic editor complements the recording, and basically, it's kind of powered by IntelliSense, right? So you don't really need to know exactly what command you're looking for. You kind of just start typing in English language, right? So I start typing random, and you'll see a whole host of synthetic data generation options there, right? So your data driven would be kind of a combination of your inputs that you provide as well as the synthetic data. And then, let's just go back to the results. I think it'll help you kind of look at one of the executions. This is, by the way, how an execution report, which was done, looks like, right? I can pretty much go into a verbose mode, and it'll give me, just like how you saw in the logic editor, it gives me pretty much down to the last level of detail, right? How was an element interacted? What was the screenshot taken at each level? Or I can just go in kind of like this video mode where I can just browse through, all the 56 screenshots for this test scenario which were captured, right? And there is a little pop-up here which exactly tells me how was the element interacted, what was the action, which is the step, and what is the page on which this was happening, right? Or I can go into any one of these details. Let's suppose I want to see when let's go into creating a requisition line, right? Let's suppose when when the line acquisitions were being added, and how complex the Oracle UI can get, right? If I click on this eye icon, it tells me exactly how the selectors were built, what are the statements, how much time each interaction is taking, right? And if I click on the element ID, it tells me exactly what element is getting interacted and what was the selector built for that element by ACCELQ's AI algorithm, right, and so on. And obviously, if you know ACCELQ, it gives you kind of full visibility into each of these, right? 81 different objects you can see got interacted, right? And if I want to see certain complex objects, right, like container objects and so on, I can click on it and it gives me kind of a good view into kind of what was the combination of elements across the DOM, and that could be hidden within any kind of structure, whether it be a shadow or a nested DOM or so on, right? And it will come back and make that match, but it gives you visibility. So as an automation engineer, you know exactly what's going on, and if you have more intelligence on it, you can kind of almost play around with the DOM and say, hey, you know what? I know that this would make it more robust in handling. How about I add this to the locator on top of what ACCELQ is suggesting, right? So it kind of gives you that flexibility of bringing your intelligence about an application aligned with this. But the advantage of this is the underlying processes are being aligned with Oracle's releases. So if tomorrow they try to, which they do, right? If they change certain objects, right, using from a shadow DOM based object to a more dynamic object, right? The definition would not have to be changed. And if it gets renewed, like I said, this page is centralized. It could be used in any number of scenarios. In fact, if I go to an action, right, and if, for instance, create journal, if I just right click on create journal and say action references, see right here, that referential integrity of universe I was talking about, it tells me what are the scenarios. In fact, it also tells me what step of the scenario it's getting used for, right? I could go into this and I could pretty much also govern what is my universe flow, which means which pages this would be applicable to, right? And that kind of gives you the design level modularity, but more in a functional kind of a business sense. Right. So I know I went really fast. This was a little bit of an addition to what everyone's been asking for. So I wanted to make sure we give you a good sneak peek into some of the things, some of the awesome things they had shared. Right. With this, I'm gonna take a new quickly switch gears to a new topic that we wanted to give you a quick sneak peek into, and then we can do a bit of questions. I want to be respectful of the time also, but if you've understood what Heather and Uday shared, and a bit of understanding of how a universe gives you a kickstart into doing your Oracle testing and how it's aligned with releases. With excelq Live, and if you followed excelq Live this year, we've launched excelq Live earlier this year. Our first edition of excelq Live had covered Salesforce, right, which has been one of our strategic partners, and we covered that a couple months back in one of the editions in our Q Live event. In this one, we are also introducing Oracle Live, right? And I couldn't be excited. We always knew Oracle was on cards, but the way this whole partnership worked out, and now we are official Oracle ISV partners. We are actually on their marketplace and the whole 9 yards, right? The Oracle Live brings basically everything you saw in the universe that I showed you, a live aspect to each and every thing that you saw, right? Which means the alignment is now not just limited to an object interaction, but Oracle Live basically takes it, think of that universe now on steroids, right? So what that really means is not just the elements which were part of the real-time alignment. Now there are live actions, which means think of it this way, that in a particular, let's take Oracle Fusion, accounts payable, accounts receivable, journal creation, these modules as probably one of the most most prominent implementations across Oracle suites, Oracle Fusion and e-business suites, right? Now think of it this way, that these behaviors, which are most common within an account payable, account receivable, creating journals, these modules are, if you think about it, the behaviors are common, which means the steps the users perform are pretty common. So what Live does is basically pre-builds these steps, but in the same modular fashion with underlying alignment to a central cloud tenant, which means your actions, your behaviors are getting inherited, we being a cloud native platform, through a central tenant, which is directly associated and aligned with an Oracle release, right? So it really brings that live to a real life manner, right? And there are a ton of Oracle pre-built components in our first release related to Oracle Fusion Cloud, right? Obviously, it brings the multi-cloud integrated automation, which means, as if you know excelq, a scenario in excelq, for instance, what I was showing you is pretty technology agnostic, right? It doesn't matter whether you're in the Oracle context or whether your Oracle is, for instance, integrated into an upstream, downstream, application like a thick client application or a microservices or a database call or other ERP applications may be your Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce or Workday or what have you, right? So that's basically kind of a combination of what Oracle Live brings to the table, right? Just like your newer age Oracle Fusion, it pretty much has cross-platform compatibility in terms of any kind of Oracle stack, but it doesn't need obviously any programming when you handle these test assets. It does align with the quarterly releases Oracle brings to the table. And trust me, that has created havoc with traditional test automation practices. ACCELQ had pretty much streamlined it with everything you heard from Uday to the customers, but Live just brings that sweetness to the pace at which Oracle is increasing those releases and the window at which Oracle is reducing your preview times, which means you have to pretty much adopt in a particular timeline, right? So with that, again, what you've always asked for, I'm going to show you actually a quick sneak peek into the Oracle Live itself also. So I'm going to just show you a blank project. Let's suppose this is a blank project. No universe exists. None of my assets exist, right? If I just go into the administration of this project, you'll see the marketplace, right? The marketplace is where all my apps exist in terms of where I can inherit my live assets from, right? So I have Salesforce, I have MS Dynamics, a whole bunch of others are coming in the pipeline, right? I'm just going to go and add this Oracle Live into my project. And if I go back to my project, you'll see I don't have scenarios, but if I go into my actions, see right here, I have browse live add-on actions. In the same project or across projects, I can keep adding different live add-ons, right? If I click on this, you'll see a whole host of live add-ons come in, which basically tells me that live add-ons are something which are pre-built behaviors, which are now inherited and are ready to go in my project. So if I now go and let's suppose I create a new scenario, right? Let's suppose I need to create a new journal and validate the entry of requisitions, right? And then let's say save and continue, and this opens up my my process designer, right? My behavior designer. Let's say I start adding steps, and now because I'm part of a live project, if you see on this bottom left, check this out, right? Hopefully you can see it. It's a little bit smaller when I'm sharing my screen, but if you see here, it actually tells me which release alignment my live add-on is related to, right? And it actually tells me if there was an upcoming release, it would actually give me a little prompt saying, "Hey, do you want to actually refresh your live add-on to your latest one so that all your assets also get that refresh?" Right? So it gives you a little confirmation prompt rather than kind of forcing it to you. So if you wanted to run it across multiple environments, you could actually also run it across multiple environments, even if you were to release it. That's kind of the beauty of how live works. But let's suppose I've verified all of that. I have my live actions. What do I really need to do, right? I want to invoke a browser, obviously. But now if you've known excelq, it's not just invoking a browser. It tells you, hey, I can invoke and actually log into your application. And see right here, it says this is a live action. Why not, right? It makes sense for me to just use a behavior which will help me log in. And see, this login is not just about just logging into an Oracle application. Obviously, that can be done with with whatever steps need to be taken. But this live action makes sure that whatever changes are brought by Oracle may introduce multi-factor authentication and make it mandatory for every customer to use multi-factor authentication. ACCELQ's partnership with Oracle will ensure how multi-factor authentication is embedded as part of the login page is taken care of by this live action behavior. But it doesn't mean it stops you from parameterizing, from making it modular, from making it your own, right? So it tells me, hey, what are the things that are needed for login, right? Obviously, I can do it literal, or I'll say, hey, you know what? I want to environmentally align it. So I'm just going to say, when I choose a test environment, use those properties. When I choose a different environment, so I'm going to just use parameterization to environmentally align it, right? Like I always say, there are many levels of parameterization you can use, right? So in this case, I'm using environment parameterization. It's asking me which page will it lead to. So even though the behaviors are getting embedded, that's why it's not the old school test steps, and it's not forcing you on the page modules, because the pages could be your own, right? Every Oracle implementation would like to name its own pages because they have their own flavor of their fields and how they kind of modularize those pages, right? So let's suppose I'm going to call it the home dash page on which this leads me to. Now it's telling me what are the different behaviors you want to add on the home dash page, right? For now, I just want to add, let's suppose, a couple of behaviors like navigation and so on, right? You can always keep changing it on that page. This is just an initial introduction to that, right? From the home page, what do you want to do, right? Let's suppose I want to initiate a new task because I want to create a new journal, right? I initiate a new task. What does it lead me to? For now, it's it's going to be on the home dash page because that's where the menu is, right? From the home dash page, what do I want to do? I want to basically open an action item, and I can keep going on and on, right? These are all my live actions, which are basically allowing me to create a complete flow, like clicking on navigation menu, initiating a new task. Sorry, too much talking. So if I have to draw a parallel, if there are some folks here who've been using excelq, right? If I go into one of the earlier flows that I had, you would see, and just to drawing the parallel of login to application, right? If I go log into application in my pre-live world, right, I would have views. I would basically capture a view, and then I would go about recording it like in a manner. I can record my automation. I would right click. I would say enter text, blah blah blah, right? But if I go into one of my live actions and I say invoke and browser log into application, I don't have any logic. I don't even handle elements. I don't even handle any kind of recording and views, right? All it tells me is what are the inputs you can make into this and what are the outcomes you're going to get out of it, right? So this inherited action is truly a live action connected to kind of a cloud tenant, right? And if I go into some of the custom actions, for instance, populating a new journal, you would be wondering that, hey, you know what, if I want to populate a new journal, I still have to do the recording because my fields are my own. But that's not how live works. So it's not just the complete steps you're getting visibility into. You actually also get live statements, which means that it's not just a complete step which is kind of blocking you out. You can create your own action and just start typing enter, and it'll give you Oracle-based special commands, which will allow you to interact with fields just by giving its values, which means I can say, hey, you know what? Enter this field, a journal named field, but I don't have to do any recordings or handle any objects. I just start typing in an English language manner saying, you know what, I just want to enter a text in an editable grid of an Oracle, right? And see right here, it's basically showing me that these are my normal actions, which are, if I were to record it in a traditional manner, right? Um, and these are my live actions, which are basically directly allowing me to record it without actually going into object identification and screen recordings and so on. All I need to have a functional knowledge of what the field is called, and I can start interacting, whether it be drop down, whether it be something even more complex like an editable grid or what have you, right? And if we look at a quick result into what was recently executed, you'll see here, it basically goes through creating a new journal. Let's go through the quick motion of it, right? And then creating new requisition lines, right, within the journal lines, and then coming back and doing a verification whether it was indeed a manual line or not, right? So if I go back in one of the steps, right, which is where kind of that validation happens, right? Adding the line and then doing the validations. But you'll see that there are no objects interacted. Everything is being inherited pretty much through that live action, which has been taken care of, right? So, again, if you have to draw a parallel, it's really taking this universe concept, and putting it on steroids in terms of, how live can kind of further speed up and align, your releases. And that's pretty much the two key topics I wanted to cover and complement, what were the things you heard from Heather and Uday. So, Joe, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Awesome stuff. So I'm just curious to know, Uday was saying universe, and I thought he was saying university. So someone had a question about how do they know how to write a low code, no code script? He said, well, the universe has examples. So is the universe generated automatically, or is it just generated based on every test you add? And does it give you an example of how to write a no code, low code script? Or does it walk you through the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So a universe is generated automatically, right? So, as you define your behaviors, the universe pretty much starts coming together. So I was just switching around to show you a simpler version of the universe, right? So as you create more and more behaviors, the universe starts coming together. There are a couple of ways you can do it, right? If you're using live, then you're getting a lot of live actions, but the behaviors are for you to create, because your end-to-end workflows are something that you would want to cater to your implementation. So that's something that you govern, but the more behaviors you create, the smarter the universe becomes. Or you can go with something like, like Uday was talking about, which is how CAP helps customers, right? Which is basically going and getting different versions of universes and starting with that, and then fine-tuning your implementation to these universes. And to answer the second part of your question, it does give you kind of on how to write low code, no code, right? So let's go in one of the steps. It will make it easier to understand, right? Let's go in one of these steps. So the way low code, no code works is, there is, by the way, in ACCELQ, I know we are all so used to hearing low code, no code. There is no code in ACCELQ. In ACCELQ, it is purely no code. So as you record these screens and you right click on your fields, it actually gives you suggested statements and interactions on that field. And when you click on something, it actually types it on that logic editor for you.
But I see an if statement, Guljeet. You said there's no code. I see an if statement there.
Very good question. Very good question. So the way we talk about this logic editor is, see, that's been the problem, Joe, in the world of no code automation, right? If you go back 20 years, every record and playback tool limits you without real world automation. What this does is, it gives me recording right here. I can click, I can record, I can do verification through my recording, but it gives me a logic editor, which is non-scripting based. The definition of code is, it is syntax based. A syntax is something which I have to follow. This is non-syntactical, which means I just start typing what occurs to me, right? I have to make a database call. I don't need to know a syntax. I just start typing data. Data occurs to me. Joe, to you, DB may occur, right? This is machine learning based algorithm, which gets smarter based on your behaviors. So whatever occurs to you, so think of an IntelliSense. When you search Google, do you really need to know a phrase when you search? You don't, right? You kind of just start typing, and it's intelligent enough to autocomplete you, right? So I start typing data, DB. Let's suppose I needed a PDF file validation here. I start typing PDF, and it gives me a host of PDF-based interactions I can do. But I'm not knowing any syntax. Once I select, it's basically an autocomplete telling me, hey, let's configure this interaction based on the input values you want, right? So similarly, if I want to run a conditional statement, if will occur to me. And then right here, it will tell me, hey, you could write a conditional statement, and it'll give me the whole framework. And now I can just write my verification, right, of what kind of verification I want to write. So it is non-syntactical, and it's more kind of intuitive compared to learning any level of specific programming or scripting, right?
But I need to know the order of things, right? Is it procedural? Is it like when I start typing at line 114, it assumes that I set up a variable as something to interact with, right?
That's right. But if you choose a local variable, it'll tell you that, hey, you haven't defined one.
Oh,
Why
nice.
don't you use a literal value?
Okay.
So the whole thing is context sensitive. So it'll keep prompting you to basically help you along the way.
Love it. Love it. Very cool.
And that brings the real world aspect to your recording, right? So that's kind of where the both ends of spectrum can meet, but without kind of injections, right?
And what I liked about Uday's session is he mentioned no code, low code multiple times. And so it seems like it really, how you said, it's like a buzzword in the industry, but he's utilizing it for a huge, huge company and being successful with it. So it was just good to see and hear for sure.
Totally. And for all the automation engineers who love code, the reason I still also use it low code, no code is here's the reason, right? We have something pretty cool called user extensions, which means you're not limited by excelq's ability, right, to extend this platform. When I start typing DB, Joe, you probably saw a whole bunch of databases there, right? You saw Postgres, you saw relational, non-relational, you saw HiveDB, Snowflakes. But let's suppose you have a Cosmos DB, right, or an Azure DB, which is just getting introduced. You don't want to wait for ACCELQ. Those days are old school days where you would hit a vendor and say, hey, when are you getting my support for? I'm an automation engineer. I want to control my own fate, right? So that's kind of where we bring in the code angle. So our code angle is different than what's understood in the industry. The industry says, hey, you know what? I have a tool where you can put in a code injection. But what we say is that's no good, right? Your automation engineers, if you have 100 automation engineers, everyone should not be writing wrappers because it's going to make a mess of your automation. We say that some of your core engineers, which are part of your COE team, can extend the framework so that everybody can take advantage of it. So you import it and everybody else gets the natural language for also handling that Cosmos DB that somebody has added. So you're not waiting for the vendor, the community is adding. So if I were to just share my screen one more time, right, you can go to academy.excelq.com and you can pretty much see, on a real-time basis, how extensions are being added by our community. Somebody is doing XML testing, somebody is doing CSV testing, somebody is adding, Cosmos DB, right? So we've made it more marketplace-driven where you can pretty much control your own fate in terms of how you add. So that's where, Joe, to your point, our code angle comes in, that it's not a black box you're handling. You can extend excelq as a platform to adopt to new technologies, right? It's coming in almost on a daily basis, right?
Very nice. So how automated is the sync up with Oracle if they push the patch? So if I'm running my test in CI, I don't know, they push the patch. Do the tests automatically adjust themselves, or do I need to go in and do something manually to update them? Like say, yes, update it, or sync up with the patch?
So if you set that add-on that I showed you, if you set it to auto update, you don't have to do anything.
Nice.
It's your choice. In some cases, customers don't want anything pushed down their throat, so they'll get a little prompt. They'll get an annoying prompt on that left bottom that, hey, you're on 22B while Oracle's on 22C. Do you want to update, right? So you can choose that setting.
Nice. All right, so let's get some quick questions right here that people submitted ahead of time, I believe. First one's, can you share a little bit more on Q Marketplace and how partners can contribute to the same? I think you mentioned it about the Academy, how people are submitting it. Is that the same as QMark?
QMark, basically, Academy is a little bit kind of more on the side of the technology stacks. Our marketplace is especially on the live packaged applications, right? So this is an example of a marketplace where you have Oracle, Salesforce, MS Dynamics. We are adding, I think the next event we are going to be doing, if I were to reveal, would be on Microsoft Dynamics. So
Yes.
you'll see a Microsoft Dynamics one, very quickly. The Workday one is in works. SAP one is in works as well. So a whole lot. Actually, Encino on the banking side is pretty much baked, and a lot of customers are already using it. You don't see it. So yeah, a lot of action happening on the Q Marketplace. One of the reasons, Uday shared what he shared was there are two aspects to the marketplace. One, the vendor themselves can add their apps to it. Like for instance, Encino as an app company has decided to add their own live add-on to the marketplace, and then you have partners who can also add, as well as ACCELQ may also decide to add. So we do realize that this is the space where multiple parties, so to say, come in with their intelligence, right? Everybody kind of comes in from a different angle. So a marketplace would also allow Capgemini, for instance, to position its live add-on so that not just their customers, but even other excelq customers who are doing Oracle testing, may not be Cap's customer, will be able to leverage their live add-on. So it's kind of like an app store, but more for your packaged enterprise vertical solutions apps, cloud apps.
All right, so I guess we have time for one last question. It's along the same lines, I guess. It is, are there any plans to have excelq Live for other niche enterprise apps like Coupa? So can Coupa add it themselves, or do they have to be integrated with you through your own back channels?
Yeah, absolutely. Coupa can add it themselves as well. And by the way, just like how they showed Coupa, they showed Oracle Fusion Universe and pre and post. If there is interest, and maybe that's a good poll question we can throw out at the end of the event as a feedback, is if there is interest in certain apps, let us know. We've done Coupa for various customers. Universe already exists. We are going with how much traction we get from the feedback from our community and our customers, and that's how we onboard live add-ons for each of these enterprise apps. So Coupa Universe already exists. Let us know if that's something which we get traction on. We can bring that on as a live add-on, or we can work with a customer partner like Cap or Coupa themselves to bring it on.
Perfect. So, Guljeet, that's actually all the questions we have. Before we go, there's any parting words of wisdom, or how anything you want to leave, or I'll wrap up excelq Live for Oracle?
No, I think we covered it all. I just want to take a second and thank Heather and Uday for coming in and really starting this event on Oracle at the right note. We wanted to bring in all the different aspects of how Oracle testing should be thought of before getting into kind of the automation nitty-gritties and the efficiencies we gain with excelq and so on. So yeah, I appreciate their time, and as always, I'm excited for the next one.
Absolutely. And Guljeet, really great demo as well. So I want to thank you as well for being one of the speakers today also. And thank you, everyone. Big round of applause for helping participate. So thank you again, Guljeet. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks everyone for joining.
All right. See you later. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Another wrap on excelq Live 2nd edition Oracle. Like I said, I learned something every time I host these events, so I'm really lucky. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Big round of applause for helping us make this a very awesome event. Thank you, everyone. Cheers. As always, test everything to keep the good.